This is Ghost of Tsushima, a beautiful game about samurais and movement. Movement adds tremendous amounts of life and artistry to this game. It's what sets it apart from its competitors. Creating movement in your art, whether it's illustration, fine art to design, adds value and appeal to it. I highly recommend you pick it up because it's fantastic, but today we're going to really focus on how we can add that type of movement into our art. So this would be a great video for you if you find your art is too stiff, and perhaps if you find it boring. So let's begin. The art of motion can seemingly be a difficult aspect to tackle in art. Think about it. Motion and sound are difficult to paint, right? It's easy to think of motion in a 2D image as featuring a character running or riding, but it's a lot more subtle than that. A painting can have a lot of movement, even if the characters in it aren't directly moving, and when that fails, it just results in another stiff image. I see a lot of these every day on Instagram from artists that just probably are not aware of it. More commonly with the design of a picture, movement is the path a viewer's eye takes through the composition. This is easier to observe in full scenes like this one I'm working on now, right? I have movement with water coming in and down all around the picture. I have the movement of the waves coming over, or the water rippling through like that. I have the movement of the dock coming right in like so. I have another subtle expression of movement with the tops of the waterfalls eclipsing like that, kind of back over to the character. It's very subtle, and it's using a lot of different aspects of this design. It's a little more of a complex scene. Well, how about those figure close-ups? Let's look at two examples here by Dan Dos Santos, right? They're singular figure, they're fairly zoomed in, but our eye, right, if we're talking about movement within this painting, we're instantly kind of drawn here because it's the focal point of the image. We're going up and following the energy around, right, past the character, over around past the character, right, down to the elbow, and then back up. It has a subtle expression of movement into it, and it's only after the fact, right, that we can even see that there is some soldiers implied back there. Likewise, on this image, we're drawn instantly to the character's chest because there's the highest point of contrast there. Then we're guided over to the elbow, we follow up the hocks, and then again down the line and the shadow of the arms to the hand, and then back up to there. Nothing about this image is coincidental. It was specifically designed for that purpose. Alright, so we just took a look at kind of movement in theory and in practice. Let's look at some other examples, as there's a lot of ways to achieve movement in your pieces. So this is the movement of shapes, and when I think of movement of shapes, Mchugh I probably butchered that name, pardon me, but his work always comes to my mind, and feel free to look up any of these artists on your own, as there's a lot more examples where these come from, but you can really see it in his work. Like, the shapes just make this. It makes the piece feel active. It makes it feel alive. From the shapes of the ripples to the dynamic placement of these vertical lines throughout the piece, to always kind of creating a sense of movement, juxtaposing it against all the horizontal lines. Just even having a very dynamic and active shape within the car, right? Bold, simple, surrounded by loads of smaller little shapes. It's always playing shapes against each other using that kind of contrast, big and small, to the direction and to the scale, that really brings a sense of movement to his work. Next up, we have the movement of form. I'm not too big into sculptors and 3D art in general, but I am very familiar with Mchugh's work. Many people are, and he's recently got into sculpting. I think he uses VR, he's using Blender, he does a variety of techniques, but sculpting is really filled with life and movement. Here's just a bit of a close-up shot of some wolves that he was applying a clay shader to, and just whether it's from the ripples and the movement in the mud and the ground, just to the muscles and the posing of the dog itself. It's absolutely filled with life and direction. Gabriel Gomez. His work is fantastic. Definitely check it out. And you can see that throughout this piece. There's little color notes and catches throughout the entirety, whether it's like the sprinkling of these green pops, all the way through. They kind of drive the movement like that. Whether it's the pinks, flowing over, down, and around, to the darker kind of contrastier shapes coming up and through. The color in this image is filled with excitement. Movement of lines. Again, another fairly popular artist, Mchugh, and I think for a reason. He does a lot of line work, and his line work gets more attention than a lot of people's, and I think it's just because it's filled with movement. You could tell he almost never even picks up the pen. It's just constantly moving. It's going here, here, up here, over, down, all around, over, through, past through. It's insanely active. Now with the movement of texture, Theo Pitzer always comes to mind when I'm thinking of that, and you can see that he has dynamic shapes. He's got a very solid composition here, but it's really this underlying use of and subtle texture. You just look at this shape filled with all these little patterns, right? And their little rhythms, their little notes of movement. It's going all over the place. Again, the painting has got little categories in constant motion with itself. Like over here, this is largely a bit slower and sweeping. This is busy, filled with that life. These are more stiff and rigid. They're going. See, there's like a different economy in every little section or every little shape of his work. And I think that's why a lot of people, myself included, are so drawn to it. It's just that movement and application of texture. And last up, we have the movement of space. Now, Mchugh, I'm not going to roll that last name off. He's doing great things. The space in his scenes are always very visually present. And I don't even know what I mean by that. But when I see his pieces, whether it's just like the simple shape construction of the space. Okay, there we have background, right? We have midground, little foreground shape, right? Big, medium, small. It's in combination with his use of atmosphere, with the bold placements of color, to the patterns and rhythms of the space in the background there, to the movement of the form coming in like that. He's using a lot of these principles to bring his concepts to life. Now, I was always taught the best expression of movement is a subtle one. So even with a singular, again, a figurative piece like this, I try to subtly incorporate some of the movement in different ways. Whether that is with texture, form, line, shape. I'm not really going to go with color on this one. So it's the lights in the background. You're making that arcing shape behind the character. It's the chaoticness of the rain moving in front of the character. So that even in a scene like this, if I'm not having the character running and leaping off a horse or a cliff, I can use that environment, just like in Ghost of Tsushima, to add life and movement to the scene. And whether it's doing a little bit of asymmetrical lighting, even exaggerating that lighting, pushing it up onto the character's face to create nice little teeny shapes against the darker, bolder shapes of the shadow or unlit areas. It's little things like that, using the little shapes of value, that can add movement across that character's body, showing them where to look. So whether we're going to the hand, if I add a little bit of highlights on the hilt there, moving it across the blade through the head, following the white line, as you see here, doing back down the back, and then following the back side of the arm up to the eventual tattoo that I made. There's a lot of little subtle movement even within the figure, background special effects aside. It's in there, and they're all kind of working in their own way to bring even a quick little sketch like this to life. And that's kind of the fun part to explore, is how can you use these fundamentals of design and use them to create a sense of movement and life in your work. But it has to be something you consciously sort of plan, because it's not going to happen accidentally. You have to think about, okay, what are the patterns doing? How are the shapes relating to each other? Is the form doing anything? Is there a clear figure-to-ground relationship that's establishing a clear amount of space? Right, because there's numerous ways to do this. There's not a right or wrong way to do it, but it should be something that we should all think about when we're creating any kind of illustration, any kind of piece of art, is how the movement is being applied and utilized within the scene. So ultimately, this leads to a larger lesson on visual hierarchy and staging, but that's a topic for another day. So guys, please let me know down below if you think this is something you're struggling with about your art. Does it look flat? Does it look static, stiff? Does it just maybe lack a little bit of an appeal? Alright? So let me know in the comments, and I'll be happy to go over them. Guys, If you want to know more about these topics, last week, after 4 months, I released a self-paced 4-volume course broken up into 12 units, each with their own exercises, demos, and lessons. Watch and learn today as my patron for as little as $7 a month. And it's thanks to contributors like Lily here that I can afford to continue to hire even additional contributors and help for more lessons. Now Lily here is a 19-year-old student from France, and she wants to be a background artist for video games and animation. She loves the French animation styles, and yeah, she has really terrific work, excellent drawing, really good shapes, characters filled with life and charm. So give her a check out at Lily's Art on Instagram. So guys, thanks for coming by tonight. Hope you enjoyed the video. Time for me to get back to some Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima. Tsushima. Yeah. You got